we're going to be talking now to Mercedes-AMG PETRONAS F1 Team. It's very bad manners for the host to have a little bit of a dig at your brilliant keynote speakers, but when they told me we've got here with about 3 minutes to spare, it was real carnage out there. I couldn't resist saying, well, you should have gone faster. Which Mercedes, which your team can and does. So to talk about sustainable innovation in high-performance motorsport, it's a real pleasure to welcome Alice Ashpitel, Head of Sustainability from Mercedes-AMG PETRONAS F1 Team. Alice, over to you.
Gone too fast already. I said I would ruin that, and I've done it straight away. So yeah, lovely to see you all today, and we did make it just in time. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about how we're kind of driving sustainable innovation within Formula One and really looking at how we can engineer change both within Formula One but crucially outside of our environment as well, and kind of demonstrate that if Formula One can do it, anybody can do it. So we're a team that goes racing 24 times a year. We travel the world, and so we have an impact, and we recognize that we're always going to have an impact. So for us, it's about how can we find these innovations or these solutions that allow us to do that in a more sustainable way. How do we travel? How do we move our people? How do we move our freight? But also, what are we putting on the car? Next year, we're going to have a really exciting change for the sport. We're going to have a new advanced sustainable fuel. The regulations and the rule books being ripped up. It's the biggest change in the sport's 75-year history. And kind of making sure that everything we do off the track as well as on the track reflects that is really important for the team. So how are we doing this, and what's our approach towards sustainability? So we've done a lot of work in the background. We've done things like a double materiality assessment. We've looked at all of the impacts we're having to make sure that we're targeting our efforts in the right area. But really what we can do is start to frame this in 4 pillars that kind of look at our impact across E, S, and G holistically. We talk about on the road, i.e. how we go racing, how do we move our people, how do we move our equipment. We also talk about at home. We have a lovely factory campus up in Brackley. You may not have heard of Brackley, it's not the biggest place on the map, but it's a small market town in Northamptonshire. And so how do we look at kind of driving sustainable innovations in a high-performance manufacturing environment? We're also looking at on the car. The car is amazing. It's a technical marvel in terms of the way in which we can race, but how are we embedding sustainability into that? Looking at the fuels, looking at the materials we put on the car, and all of the technology that goes into a race weekend. And then finally, and I think the one that's really exciting and where Formula One is really at the intersection of sports and technology and therefore can drive real innovation, is beyond our world. We use a lot of carbon fiber on a Formula One car. 75% approximately of the car is made of carbon fiber. But actually, when you look at the volume we use of carbon fiber compared to aerospace, it's tiny. However, if we can drive sustainable innovations in carbon fiber and accelerate that technology, the implications for aerospace and outside are huge. And that's really where I think we can drive impact beyond our world. And that's why we've kind of dedicated an entire pillar of our sustainability approach to that. So it's always nice to take a little step back, look at what we've kind of achieved, and I'll touch on some of the projects that have delivered this. But really, we're very proud of what we've achieved so far, but recognise there's still a long way to go. So from an environmental perspective, we've set ourselves 2 targets. We want to be net zero in 2040 across all of our scopes in line with the climate pledge. But we also have a 2030 target to reduce our race team control emissions by 75%. Race team control emissions for us are essentially all of the carbon emissions that take us from the factory to going racing and coming back again. And the reason we've done that, it's a mixture of all of our scope 1 and 2, but also parts of our scope 3, such as our business travel, our commuting, our upstream logistics. We've done that because we recognise we can drive real change in that space faster, and we want to make sure we're doing that to demonstrate that we can go racing in a more sustainable way. And some of the achievements we've had in the last year have been that we moved 98% of our European road freight on HVO 100 last year, which saved over 500 tonnes of carbon. That is a logistical challenge. It's very complex, moving between multiple European races across a season, but demonstrating we can do that and go through a triple header, i.e. we go from 3 different countries in 3 weekends on a more sustainable fuel, is really impactful because it shows that we can drive those changes beyond motorsport into wider freight and logistics. We've also been doing a lot of work on sustainable aviation fuels, which I'll touch on in a minute. And all of this is underpinned, I think really important to mention, by strong governance and by making sure that everything we're doing, we're making sure we're doing it in the right way and that we're being really transparent, that we're making sure that when we report on our carbon footprint, it's being independently assured. When we're talking about measures and steps we've taken, that we're really accountable for the methodologies, because it's so important to demonstrate that the change we're having, how have we measured that and how are we holding ourselves to account as we do this. So I'm going to touch a little bit on those 4 pillars that I spoke about, kind of starting with on the road. And this is really about how are we finding those innovations that reduce the carbon footprint of essentially taking a team of people and 2 F1 cars around the world 24 times. So the 2 things that I'm really proud of the team having achieved over the last couple of years is really scaling innovation. So I think what's important here is how we've taken concept and proof point from trial. So for example, HVO100, we trialed that for the first time in 2023. We looked at a triple header at the end of our European season, and we took a couple of the trucks on HVO100 on that journey. And that was a big step for the team, because if those trucks don't turn up at a racetrack, we're not going racing. So building the confidence that the HVO100 could meet the same miles per gallon, would not affect the truck's mobility, and could be sourced was super important. But having built the team's confidence in year 1, in year 2, we rolled that out much more broadly across Europe and has achieved a 74% coverage. And then last year, through kind of building on that learning, understanding where refueling points worked, where they didn't work, because that's also part of the journey. It's not always going to work first time. We were able to get 98% coverage last year. And then the stat that isn't on this slide, because it's such a recent development for us, is that actually for the first time this year, we were able to move the race cars on an electric truck, a fully electric truck, firstly from Brackley to Silverstone, which is not the longest journey in the world. I will acknowledge that, but it was a trial for us to make sure that, again, the trucks worked, that we could move the cars there. And then the great build from that was in Zandvoort recently, where we actually were able to move the cars on an electric truck that went all the way from Silverstone to Zandvoort, which was a little bit of a longer journey. And the trucks were able to do that and get the cars there and go racing on a fully electric solution. So this is all kind of building that sustainable fuels journey and kind of getting people comfortable with how these innovations work and building confidence in our logistics and freight teams. And actually now they're super excited about how they can keep accelerating this, how they can find the new innovation. So driving that change through bringing the people in the team along with us has been great. And then on the other side, from the road to the air, a lot of what we do requires us to fly, and we recognise that that's a critical part of our sport, but how can we do that better? A couple of years ago, we recognised the power of sustainable aviation fuel in the decarbonisation of the aviation sector, which I'm sure everyone here acknowledges is one of the hardest to decarbonise sectors. So what we looked at was how could we credibly invest in good sustainable aviation fuel certificates, transparently account for that, and grow our demand in line with industry to help send key demand signals. So we started investing in 2022, and by the end of 2025, we will have quadrupled the volume of sustainable aviation fuel certificates that we're procuring to reduce our aviation impact. And last year, that enabled us to reduce our aviation impact by over 9,000 tonnes of CO2. Again, what's really important for us is being really transparent in this, and we recognise that there's still work to be done in the sustainable aviation fuel sector in terms of accounting methodologies, in terms of making sure that we're being robust in how we're reporting this. So we do something called dual reporting, which essentially means that you can always see what our footprint is with and without these market mechanisms to make sure that we're investing in the solutions we believe are credible and are going to drive real lasting impact, but we're also holding ourselves to account and showing what our largest areas of impact are. And it's really great now that we're seeing the sport kind of adopt sustainable aviation fuel and these other technologies, because that's what's going to help continue to drive our impact down. I talk about at home, and it's a very lovely sunny picture of our factory here in Brackley. And here it's all about how are we bringing the impact and the innovation that happens on the track back to our factory to really reduce our emissions, but also find those ways of bringing our team along with us. So one of the really exciting things about Formula One is your car is never done across the season. You're constantly developing, you're constantly manufacturing, and so your energy loads are really key. But what we've really been focusing on is how can we embed monitoring and behaviours within the business to install more efficient machinery, to create more efficient behaviours and to really challenge people to look at their emissions through installation of kind of a sub-metering system and energy dashboards across the departments, which has actually helped us bring down our overall energy consumption by 1%. But critically, in terms of the growth of the business, that's come down by 17% relative to our overall growth. And that's come about from Formula One is quite competitive, and we've got some very competitive departments within the business. So when you can kind of point to a dashboard that says, actually, this manufacturing team over here has achieved this saving through implementing this new technology, they go, we can do that better, and we're going to find a way to do that better. So it's about kind of pulling those levers and making sure that we're driving innovation kind of in all aspects of what we do. And that rolls out to things like waste, which I'm sure is not the most glamorous topic that everyone talks about, but in sustainability, super important. How do we look at the circular economy and start to embed those strategies? So we've been looking a lot at team kit. How do we make that more circular? How do we start to recycle more of the equipment? A lot of the parts and materials that we use to build a Formula One car are composites and are very hard to recycle. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment to look at how do we disassemble, or how do we kind of make things last longer, and actually look at this in the round, because in Formula One, that's again where we can drive a really big impact, kind of beyond a lot of the good work that we're doing around recycling rates and all of the work in that space to bring down absolute waste is really critical for us as a team. And the bit that I think is super exciting, the car, the thing that fans love to see, and it drives, passion right across the sport. For us, there's some really exciting ways in which we're starting to look at sustainable innovations on the car, and I'll touch on just a few. So there's kind of two areas of this. There's the manufacture of the car, and how are we actually encouraging people to manufacture the car more efficiently? And one of the ways we've been doing that is working with the supply chain and embedding sustainable innovation within the supply chain to ask them to go, how can you be more lean and more efficient in the manufacturing process? How do we reduce the volume of scrap when you're making a component? How do we make sure that we're reducing the amount of damage? And we've been able to bring that down by 10%, which is a really big achievement in terms of wastage. But actually also super excitingly is the innovations that are going to go into the materials on the car. I touched on carbon fiber composites earlier. Finding more sustainable solutions for carbon fiber, more sustainable feedstocks, has huge implications for the carbon footprint of carbon fiber, which is very energy intensive, but also for the recyclability of the material and the circularity as a whole. So we've announced a commitment this year to look at embedding more sustainable carbon fiber composites on the car this year. And it's really exciting to see the development progress that's going on there. And this is, as I said, where Formula One will be able to drive those innovations outside of our own sphere of influence, but continue to deliver thrilling racing week in, week out. And then beyond our world. So everything I've spoken about here, hopefully you can see has applications already beyond the world of Formula One. But there is one area in particular that we've really focused on to kind of how can we drive our impact? And it kind of comes back to our net zero target. So in 2030, we want to have brought those emissions down by 75%, the emissions that take us from going racing at the factory and back again. But really, carbon removal is going to play a critical role in our journey as well. The 75% that we reduce, there's going to be 25% left that we want to remove through really credible, durable removal solutions. And this is where we're championing a couple of different technologies at the moment that we think are really important. And I'll touch on a couple of them. So one of them is soil carbon. And this isn't the most durable carbon removal solution out there, but it has amazing co-benefits. And we've been investing in a farm not far away from the Silverstone track, where we've been looking at supporting regenerative agriculture being implemented to help improve soil health and crucially capture carbon from the atmosphere. The reason we love this project is that it actually aligns really nicely, although you kind of go, agriculture, Formula One, how do they come together? But this model is actually trialing really innovative measurement techniques to try and demonstrate how we can scale local farming and scale carbon removal and regenerative agriculture at a local scale to a much wider scale within the UK, and actually look at how we can use the UK soil as a massive carbon sink. And the measuring techniques that the team are using there are really innovative and exciting. And so again, it's that kind of link between how are we driving innovation in Formula One and also outside of Formula One. We've also invested in reforestation projects in the United States, again, using really great soil monitoring, tree monitoring technology, and really finding those solutions that are semi-permanent. We recognize they're not the permanent, durable solutions with a 1,000-year life, but we're also starting to invest in those technologies and hoping to see those kind of start to deliver some permanent carbon removals by as early as 2027. So what's really important here is that we recognize we have an opportunity to demonstrate these technologies work and are part of a credible net zero strategy beyond reducing our emissions. So reducing will always be our priority, but removal will be a key part of that journey for us. And I think it's really nice to kind of take a step back and think of the fans for a minute, because at the end of the day, we are a sport that inspires a huge amount of passion and engagement with our fans. And we've done some research into this, and we've seen that our fans really care about our sustainability journey and are really passionate about it. And so it's so important for us to embed that into everything that we're doing. And we ran a survey, and I think there's just two really interesting stats to kind of pull out here. So just over 3/4 of our specific team fans consider F1's sustainability approach to be important for their fandom. So that's a huge imperative for us to do the right thing. And then 53% of our fans say that the sustainability changes that are happening in 2026, so the advanced sustainable fuel, the brand new power unit, which is going to be 50% electric, 50% advanced sustainable fuel, is positively impacting their perception of the sport. So there's huge potential for us to continue to drive these innovations and really bring the fans along on this journey with us. And I think with that, I would love to open the floor to some questions. I think I've actually held that to my 5-minute question brief as well. On the nose.
I'll pass you my microphone.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Isabel Devan at the Carbon Trust. I was really excited about your agriculture and beyond, your own scope initiatives. I mean, have you thought, and obviously because I'm at the Carbon Trust, I think about assurance. Have you thought about assuring it so you can communicate more widely to others? Because I think that's a really important story to tell.
As in assuring our footprint or assuring our removals?
Assuring the removals and kind of getting opinions, because there's several different methodologies. So I was just wondering how to communicate them more.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think for us, that's what we really want to do, is share what we're doing and what's working and also what isn't. So we've had our footprint assured for a number of years, and we're now starting to look at some of those wider areas, some of those things like removals, but we haven't quite developed an approach to that yet. I think it's still a little bit unclear the best approach, and would really welcome best practice from other places to see how we can actually do that in a really credible way, because there are lots of different standards and lots of moving pieces on the chessboard at the moment.
A question over here.
Hi, thank you. I'm Alona from Morelli, but here more in a personal capacity because I'm a huge F1 fan. I have a slightly tricky question for you. So obviously F1 is massively driven by performance. And do you have situations where performance and sustainability clash with each other and you have to make choice on how to address it internally?
No, it is a really good question. I actually like being asked that question because I actually think when done right, sustainability and performance complement each other. And I think F1's the perfect way to show that, because it's all about finding efficiencies. And that's kind of at the heart of what we're trying to do with sustainability. We're either trying to be more resource efficient, so when we're trying to encourage better energy consumption or less waste, that actually ties in really nicely to a sport that wants to be really lean and really fast. So I think actually for me, it kind of holds me to account to make sure that the sustainability initiatives I'm recommending and identifying are bringing kind of performance or not detracting from performance. So actually, I think it's reframing it as an opportunity, and then also challenging ourselves to find those things that are going to work in good business sense as well as in terms of for the environment.
We've got a question here.
Thank you very much. I really like the Beyond Carbon part and to be like a leader in that. Quick question, do you have like an internal team that selects the project for you, or you're relying on third-party service provider?
It's a blend, actually. So I'm really lucky to have, I'm part of a team of 5 sustainability professionals. So kind of we've really grown our internal knowledge, but we recognize that to be an expert in sustainability across everything that happens is impossible. So we really do rely on kind of third-party advice. We're also very lucky to have a very deep partner stack with a lot of expertise within our partners who can actually bring lots of knowledge in things like the carbon markets and recommendations. So we actually utilize our network internally a lot to kind of help us implement those strategies.
I think we can take one more question. There's a hand up at the back.
Thanks so much for sharing. I mean, just incredible innovation that's happening. I represent a global network called the League of Intrapreneurs, so innovators inside organizations working on sustainability. And I guess the question is on behalf of those folks that are struggling, because your story sounds so rosy, so many successes, it's amazing, you're working with the ecosystem. But how did it get there? Like, how did you make the business case for really this level of investment? I think a lot of people are still struggling to get it to the core of the business. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I definitely learned lessons on the way. And there are things that didn't work the first time we tried. And I think a couple of things for me, when we set our net zero targets and when we said we wanted to achieve a kind of 2030 target, we embedded carbon removals into the target from day one, and we embedded all of the measures, and we're really clear about the measures that we were going to need and the scale of the investment that was going to be needed at the point of setting that target. So when the business committed to the target, they were committing to it in the round. But then I think crucially kind of really framing sustainability with almost like a CFO's mindset, and really looking at how are we driving business value. And it really challenged me to rethink about how I was looking at sustainability, but that enabled me to kind of put my feet in the shoes, that's the right saying, of somebody who is making those decisions and say, what works there? And actually, when we started to look at sustainability as driving efficiency, sustainability, and it's not anything different to what we were already doing, but just framing it in the correct way, that started to be when we unlocked the opportunities. And then getting those trials, getting things like HVO over the line where it didn't impact anybody's ability to do their job and has actually delivered really great stories and made people engaged and enthusiastic. It's kind of finding that balance between the internal engagement and making sure that we're delivering performance alongside the sustainability initiatives. But I could talk for hours on that, but I recognise that I've got plus 9 seconds on my timer now.
And ticking away. Now that means you're over. Absolutely.
Exactly, so I'm done.
Alice, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. I do apologise, and loads of hands were going up. Alice Ashpitel, thank you.
Thank you.